You have within you the power and the capability to achieve anything or almost anything that your heart desires. Like it's all possible. And that the biggest enemy that you'll have is you. It's not your competitor. It's not Johnny down the road. It's not, the bank or the investor. It's you.
Hi, everyone. This is LoCascio. Welcome to another episode of Over the Wall. Today, I'm joined with Doug Evans, a great friend. I kind of look back, I think 20 years we've known each other. And Doug's what I call the ultimate in serial entrepreneurs. He's just had so many different businesses, ups and downs, and just continues forward. And we had some kindred spirit moments when I started LivePerson, and he was starting another company, and we were kind of battling it out at the beginning. And so I thought it'd be great to have him on the show. So welcome, Doug, to Over the Wall.
Thanks so much, Rob. I love and cherish these times that we get to have together, and the memories I'll never forget. There's so many. And so I'm glad to be able to share them.
First of all, if people are tuning in, they can see you're in some sort of structure, which I would call a yurt. So yeah. maybe it's good to like we'll set the geolocation on Doug Evans. Where is Doug Evans?
Right now, I'm in the Mojave Desert in a little town east of Joshua Tree, and I am in a yurt. And this was a Burning Man yurt that I set up camp here after my first burn, like almost 4 years ago. And I had a vision that I loved Burning Man, but I didn't like porta potties. I liked running water, and I really thought I wanted to be around hot springs. So I manifested the ability to live in the desert with sunrises, sunsets, no light pollution, where I can literally know like what time the moon is going to rise every day.
I think that you used a word that just sums it up with you is manifest. And maybe you can talk a little bit about, you've manifested a pretty interesting life. And maybe just I know it, but maybe talk a little bit about like all the things, where did you come from? All these things you did, from street art and this and that. I mean, you did all, like, just maybe give people because it's an extraordinarily entrepreneurial life of anyone I know on earth. You've manifested these visions of your life, right?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a normal upbringing, right? A dysfunctional, lower middle class, upbringing in Upper Manhattan. And I think where I veered off the path was that my parents sent me to a private Hebrew school, and I just did not get the language. I didn't understand, the dogma of the orthodoxy, and I didn't relate to the other students. And so from that point, I was somewhat of an outcast. So I didn't want to be with them. And I ultimately manifested myself being thrown out of this most tolerant school where everyone was so kind and nice. I look back and I go, every one of my classmates was just nice. The teachers were nice. And I was just so terrible. And then I ended up in the New York City public school system, in public junior high school. And there were drug dealers and there were gang members. And
what year was this? What year is this? Is it in the 70s or?
Yeah, this was in the 70s. Yeah, late 70s. And so, and then there were the guys that were tagging and writing graffiti. And I was like, oh, they seem like cool. But my energy level was very different from them. So they wanted to write a little graffiti, and then they wanted to smoke some pot, and then they wanted to drink some 40s. And I didn't relate to that for some reason. I was never into, I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I've never drank a cup of coffee in my life. You could count on your hands and toes how many times I've been drunk, or probably on one hand to be accurate. And so I was writing graffiti, and then I had some talent, So I was able to get into High School of Music and Art when it was in Harlem. And that was a crazy scene because I was this skinny little white kid and I was so terrified that I would run from the subway to school up the hill and then run back because I was so terrified of the gang members and just the environment. And probably 90% was in my head, but
Yeah.
it was very real.
That was the Fame School. Is that the Fame School or no? Is that the school?
No,
Fame?
Fame was the sister school, High School of Performing Arts.
Performing Arts.
They merged them together in Lincoln Center. But when I went, it was in Harlem on 135th Street.
Yeah.
And so it was crazy. And then I got thrown out of there because I didn't go to class and I didn't want to paint, at the time nudes that like, it was just like, what am I doing here? And so it was really cool to go out and write graffiti and steal spray paint and break into subway yards. And so I did that until I was 17 years old, when then my other graffiti friends were going to jail. They were going into the military. Some were dying. And so I just felt that, oh my God, now I'm 17. If I don't get my shit together, I'm really like, life is over. Like, I don't want to be in jail. I don't want to be dead. So I joined the US Army. Yeah. And that was the craziest, like, I mean, turned out to be a good decision, but a crazy decision because there I was more of an outsider and an outlier. Like, I was prepubescent in the military and they had no stalls on the showers or the toilets. And for me, used to being able to talk my way in and out of anything here in the military, I remember day one, they poured my duffel bag into the snow. And I went to gather my belongings and the drill sergeant's like, you don't need this, you don't need that. And I looked at him and the look I gave him evidently didn't go over well. So he made me that day probably do 500 push-ups and sit-ups. I was like Jesse Itzler and Seal, but in the snow. They shaved my head, they took away all my personal belongings, and they did everything that they could to make me feel like shit and to want to quit. And so midnight that night, 11 o'clock, I went to the commanding officer and I said, you got the wrong guy. I'm going to go home. I'll be a good boy. I'll go to community college. And like, I missed my mommy. I mean, there was no joke. I missed my mommy. And he looks me dead in the eye and he goes, there's no way out. There's no bars on these windows. But if you leave, you're going to spend the rest of your life as a fugitive. And then they will find you. And then you will be doing hard labor. So get the fuck out of my office. And I was like, holy shit. Like, what? Like, I thought the military was going to be like Private Benjamin, like a comedic joke. And it was not.
So you get through that. Then finally you get discharged.
I get discharged
honorably, I assume.
I mean, I got thrown out, but I got an honorable discharge.
You got an honorable discharge, and then you're in New York City, right? You come to New York City. I don't know what year was that.
This was like 1983.
So maybe we can, there's probably more of a, maybe there's other things in between, but we meet somewhere in the night in the.
Yeah, we met in the late 90s.
99, we probably met. I think I was pre-public, but we met in 99. What were you doing then? I forgot. I was trying to think today. How did we meet? Who brought us together?
We met at Jeff's house, at a penthouse party, and I brought a stinky durian fruit.
You brought a durian, and that's where we met. Was when you brought the durian.
Yeah, and you were just like, we just hit it off there, and we would go for like 3-hour, 4-hour walks.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was a nice little bromance back then.
I agree. I remember this story. We were at this party. Now that you tell me, and it started to smell like rotten eggs, and people thought there was a gas leak, and the party stopped at this beautiful loft, down there where he was off of
Soho and Lafayette.
Yeah, we're still Lafayette. And we walk, and there you are cutting a durian, which if you don't know what a durian is the most precious fruit from Asia, but is the most stinkiest fruit. It's like illegal to open it in a in a public place in Hong Kong, and he opened it up and shut the party down. I remember walking out with you, and in one way I'm thinking, this is the craziest guy I've ever met. Another way I'm thinking, well, he's ballsy. He does what he wants to do. So,
well, I wanted to share that gift with Jeff and the other people that were there. And, to Durian, to some people, it smells like hell, like rotten eggs and gas. But to other people, it's like an aphrodisiac, and it pulls you in, and it's very rare and precious. So I thought I was just sharing this unique gift that I had at the moment.
So I wanna touch upon. I wanna say a sentence, and I want you to react to it, because I remember walking with you, and you had memorized something. And I want to start with, today I begin a new life.
Yes. Today I begin a new life. I shed my old skin, which hath too long suffered the bruises of failure and the wounds of mediocrity.
Okay, I will greet this day with love in my heart.
Okay, I will greet this day with love in my heart, for this is the greatest secret of success in all ventures. Muscle can split a shield and even destroy life, but only the unseen power of love can open the hearts of men, and until I master this art, I will remain no more than a peddler in the marketplace.
I will persist until I succeed.
In the Orient, young bulls are tested for the fight arena in a certain manner. Each is brought to the ring and allowed to attack a picador who pricks them with a lance. The bravery of each bull is then rated with care according to the number of times he demonstrates his willingness to charge in spite of the sting of the blade. Henceforth, I will recognize that each day I am tested by life in like manner. If I persist, if I continue to try, if I continue to charge forward, I will succeed. I'll persist until I succeed. I was not delivered until this world in defeat, nor does failure course in my veins. I'm not a sheep waiting to be prodded by my shepherd. I am a lion, and I refuse to talk, to walk, to sleep with the sheep. I will hear not those who weep and complain, for their disease is contagious. Let them join the sheep. The slaughterhouse of failure is not my destiny. I'll persist until I succeed. The prizes of life are at the end of each journey, not near the beginning, and it is not given to me to know how many steps are necessary in order to reach my goal. Failure I may still encounter at the 1,000th step, yet success hides behind the next bend in the road. Never will I know how close it lies unless I turn the corner. Always will I take another step. If that is no avail, I will take another and yet another. In truth, one step at a time is not too difficult. I'll persist until I succeed. Henceforth, I'll consider.
Okay, I got it. So,
okay, let's.
So if you're wondering, if anyone's listening and wondering where this comes from, if you are at the beginning of the journey, and I can say this, and Doug and I had a kindred spirit around this book called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And Doug, unlike me, did something I didn't do. He memorized. That's his memory, by the way. I don't think he's reading. You weren't reading a thing.
No, of course not.
I know. He memorized. There's 10 scrolls. I will persist until I say, I am nature's greatest miracle. I will live this day as it is my last. Today I will be a master of my emotions. I will laugh at the world. Today I will multiply my value 100-fold. I will act now, and finally, I will pray for guidance from God. And I can say something, is that we were following this book, him and I, right there, and we were following this. You were supposed to memorize it and read it every day to build pretty much neural pathways around not giving up. So this is the guy I wanted to do, because I know he has gone through so much. And when you think about, I will persist until I succeed, he's the one who did. But there's a trick here, right? Why did you gravitate towards that? Why did you do the work there on The Greatest Salesman in the World? You know,
I mean, it's pretty simple that we have voices in our head, right? And it's very easy to quit, right? And it's easy to, think about things in a subconscious, way. So what I thought was, if I'm going to say something to myself in my head, I want to create immediacy. Like, that you said, I will act now. Like, I want to have, like, I will act now, I'll act now, I'll act now. When I feel fear, I will lunge ahead, right? There's the line in the persistence. I will remember the ancient law of averages and I will bend it to my good. Like, you're an entrepreneur, you're raising money. Like, I mean, I raised $150 million in my career, right? In Juicero alone, 135 million. Most people said no to me, right? Most people said no. And so how do I take that no and like who cares? Next, right? How do you get the gumption and the chutzpah to go ask someone another time, right? How do you go after being rejected, over and over again and still have the courage to get up and do it again and not look meek, right? And not look like you're a failure, but have the internal like fortitude and the confidence. So when I read that book, every single word resonated with me. And I said, right now, I'm not there. Like, I'm just not there, but I want to be there. And if the only thing it took was for me, like, I remember going on dates. I remember taking a woman to the Hamptons and we got this beautiful little chalet, like a cabin, and a cute cabin. And we have this dinner and then we walk on the beach and then we're about to get into bed. And I go, excuse me, I need some personal time. And she goes, what are you doing? I said, I need to read out loud all 10 scrolls in the mirror with as loud and as enthusiastic as I can. And she's like, are you kidding me? Like, and I was like, oh, no, you don't understand. Like, I must do this. So maybe you go take a walk, go look at the moon, but this is happening. And if you can't handle that, like, I'm okay. But this is the priority.
So let's talk about that, because I've talked to a number of guests about the voice in the head, the voice, that little voice. And I've explained it. I've had this little voice in my head that has just, it's the voice tells me a phrase. And I'll ask you something. Mine was always telling me, you're too young. You're too young to do this. You're too young to go public. You're too young to raise money. You're too that. And sometimes I would bring bad people in my life who are older, because that would kind of satisfy this too young thing. And then eventually I learned to beat that voice, right? But it sits there. It still sits there. And I'm curious, and I've asked different guests, what are the voices in their head? It's a very personal thing. I don't know if you're willing to share it, but is there something that the voice has told you that is not, it's like a little gremlin? If you want to share, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for like there was one voice, right? And it's not exactly like speaking the voice. It's more of like, deeper. Like it's impregnated into like, my being. Like one is like, I'm not good enough, right? I'm not smart enough, right? And the fact that I never went to college, right? I have no higher education, that there was a level that I'm not good enough. Like it put a distance and separation between all these other people, with academic accolades or privileged background. And I felt like I wasn't there, right? So just I felt like I wasn't good enough, right? So that was one voice that really drove me to say, well, I could be good enough. I could be better. And there was this challenge inside of forcing to saying, oh,
So is it
I
not
can do
smart
that.
enough? Because same with me. The thing is, like, I'm too young, comma, I'm not good enough. That's what everyone hears, like Lisa Blue is like, I'm stupid, comma, I'm not good enough. So is there like that? Is it, I didn't go to college, or I'm not smart enough, comma, I'm not good enough? Or what's that, is the pre-phrase, the deep thing?
I mean, part of it is like the deeper is even like the voice of, you're a bad boy, you'll never turn out to anything, right? You're bad, you're not smart, you'll never turn out to anything, right? So like that was, really much in the head.
Yeah. So the question is, how, this is one of the, I talk about the mind and the entrepreneur. I know in the bad days, I acted on the voice,
Yeah.
right? You act on it. And so maybe, I don't know if you can explain because I think entrepreneurs have this voice. It's whatever reason. And it may be even the thing that drove us to be entrepreneurs or drove us to prove that we're not our voice. But we also, I think we end up doing bad things. We surround ourselves by bad people. We make bad decisions. I'm not saying the voice is everything, but I feel like it's if you play into it, it can be harmful. And I don't know if you have any like life stories there or anything, but I found I did that early on. I lost my first company. I made so many bad mistakes and I ended up on this couch for 2 years broke. And a lot of it is because of this gremlin in my head.
Yeah. I mean, one seemingly consequential decision that I made was wanting to be a pleaser. Like when I got to a certain level of success, right, there was the imposter syndrome and wanting to be a pleaser. And I remember when I was working out of Kleiner Perkins's offices on Sand Hill Road, and like I then was a workaholic. Now I just work hard, but then I was a workaholic. So I would be in the office, first one there, last one out, 7 days. And when security would come by, like on the weekends, like patrolling the office, I would have a temptation to duck under the desk, to think like I didn't belong there, that security was going to, pull me out of the office. Right. So that was like one thing. And I ultimately, got used to it. I was like, no, I really have ID. I'm really supposed to be here, like it's real. But then I think as an entrepreneur, and if there are other entrepreneurs listening to this, no one knows your company better than you, right? And I knew the company, but I also had raised a lot of money. I had a powerful board of directors. And when my powerful board of directors said, "Hey, we think that you and the company and the board and everyone would be served if we brought in another CEO to be your partner." And like I wanted to please, like they had given a lot of money.
This is juicero. This is the public company, the most public of companies you had that had a big fail in the end, went on. But this is that company, right?
Obviously. Yeah. This is the Juicero board.
Yeah.
And my gut said, but then the little voice was like, oh, they must know better. You don't want them to be mad at you. Like you don't want that confrontation. So I acquiesced because, you hear of the other Silicon Valley stories where the board removes you. So I thought like I had just such a great, relationship with the board that like I hate to think of myself as naive. And I was naive and weak in that moment. And I think for me, that was the beginning of the end. Like when I was no longer CEO, I couldn't order a house plant, for my office. I couldn't make any decisions. I didn't realize how marginalized a founder is when he's no longer CEO.
Right. And so I guess you're saying there's this continuum between pleaser and imposter.
Yeah.
And this is this continuum, and you're trying to find your way, especially as you build a company and get bigger, you're trying to find your way in there to be true to yourself, which is interesting because we talk about the inner voice, about what is that inner voice that I believe guides you. And if you really listen to it, even though sometimes it goes against what your brain's telling you, it ultimately guides you. But what do you think that inner voice is? What is that thing that you said, like internally at my gut, we call it gut, told me I should stay on the helm.
Right.
Here, socialized, said, no, I should do something else.
Yeah. So the voice is part of what makes you know you're alive, right? Because and there's a separation between, what I say and what the voice says. Like I can look at, you know, I can look at fruit in the morning and say, oh, that's beautiful. I want to eat it. And then I also can say, oh, but I'm doing fasting until noon, so I don't eat that. So I can
Right.
actually have a conversation with myself.
Yeah.
And and sometimes I get confused between, who's in charge, right? Because one part of me really wants it, and then, who is the higher self within the voices and discerning that. Like that's something that, I've been working to figure out for a long time.
Yeah. I ended up in India 10, 15, 10, 11 years ago, and I ended up at this ashram. It sounds like, a typical thing, but I ended up there, and it's like sometimes you end up places. Somewhere I learned there that maybe this is a God-given thing. Maybe this is your purpose, and it's given to you as a guide. You just have to try to follow it. I think maybe you're saying, is it of the higher? Is it of something higher above us? That was given to us as a gift,
Yeah.
and we just got to follow it, right? I don't
Well,
know.
I mean, it's really interesting for me at a level of shifting from the voice that felt that money would solve all problems. Money would get you the good relationship, money would get you the house, money would get you the material things and the status and the clubs. Like I remember wanting to be in the Soho house, right? So badly, right? And then I got in and I never went. Like not once did I go, and then I put my membership on hold for a year, right? Thinking, well, I'll go the next year. And then I went to put it on hold the following year, and they said, oh no, you only can put it on pause for 1 year. You'll have to either resign and then reapply or pay up. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so it's this feeling, but now at my level, I feel really grounded. Like, by the way, in my yurt, there is no concrete floor. Like it is the dirt in the yurt, only separated by a recycled LA billboard between me and the earth. So I feel really grounded. But there's a level of now that I have clear conviction about who I am, what my purpose is, what I want to do in life, and what fits my threshold of acceptance of what I'll do, what I won't do. And I really feel that, like, I watch your success, right? I mean, I remember when your stock was 12 cents a share, Rob, okay? Like, I mean, it was a dark day. I mean, you could not have been more depressed,
Yeah.
you know, when the stock was 12 cents. I don't know what it is now, but it's a lot more,
Yeah,
right?
$70 or something. Yeah, 67 pounds. Yeah.
So big difference.
Yeah.
And and I was thinking like, oh my God, I'm a great salesperson. I can open up some big corporate deals for Rob, right? Like I'll be able to do this. And and then in order to survive, right, in the early 2000s, like I ended up, not working for you, but I ended up working for two media companies. And I remember talking to you because you had just started to use Twitter in 2005, and you were explaining it to me. Oh, I'm going to the airport. And I was like, who the fuck cares, Rob? You're going to the airport, you know? And, but I remember that in order to be true to myself and want to have like an organic business in New York City, um, and no one would fund us. Like
Yeah.
selling green juice in New York City out of the Lower East Side, it was non-financeable business. That I ended up going to Silicon Valley and carrying two bags and putting those sales to work. And then I ended up like sabotaging myself because I would only sell to what I felt was a neutral or positive company. So I wouldn't do a cigarette deals. I wouldn't do fast food deals. So the largest spenders were like the McDonald's and Burger King and Taco Bell and Frito-Lay. So all of a sudden, like here I am, I'm supposed to be selling, and I put my own values and I wouldn't sell any of these products. And ultimately, I said, you know what? I'm wasting my time.
But this
Like
is organic. This is when you start, or this is Organic Avenue, right? When you start this,
yeah,
way before juice anything was like even on the map. You had such a vision, but there was some wall. Like, what are the walls? We talk about over the wall there. That was kind of that was, I feel like, your entry point. I mean, you've been a raw vegan for, I remember when you pulled the gas out of your apartment, you cut the gas line on your apartment because you didn't want gas. I was like, he's hardcore. You were way organic. You were raw vegan before anyone even thought about this. But you make your way into Organic Avenue, which is interesting. And you're like taking your passion for being healthy, eating healthy, your relationship with food. But there's some walls you were start sabotaging. Like, what happened there? What was the, like, what are the walls, first of all, starting that when no one cared about juices back then, and anything organic was like kind of strange. What were some of the walls there and stuff like that?
Well, for one was I had an internet printing company before that. So my only experience with organic was eating it. So to go from, graphic design to printing, and then say, oh, we're going to open up a retail store and we're going to provide fresh, raw, vegan soup, juice, smoothies, salads, entrees, and we're going to make it ourselves. Like, I had never been in the kitchen, right? I'd never done anything like that. So for one, it was like, where do you start? Right. So I had a partner, who is still a close friend, Denise, and she had really the vision for the business, but she didn't have the business acumen. So all of a sudden, like, I had to figure out, how do we get the lease? How do we get shelving and displays and signage? Like, how do we get an illuminated sign? And then how do we prepare a kitchen, and where do we get the equipment, and what are the legal ramifications for food safety and labeling? And then how do we hire staff? And so we went and started, we started the business out of my loft in Chinatown. And then we opened up a retail store, and we moved the kitchen into a 350 square foot basement in a tenement building that was literally rat infested. And so I took my army strategy and I said, we're going to build like barricades underneath this. This will be like a bunker, and there just will not be any room for any vermin to enter my sacred space. Like, there just won't be any room. Like, we'll reline the walls with steel. We'll put in insulation, and there just will not be. And we had a zero tolerance for any bug, but it meant getting truckloads delivered on the street and bring it down the stairs. And within 6 months, we outgrew that basement.
But you were basically, so you were, so you had no skill in this. Let's be honest. You didn't have knowledge. You weren't like, you didn't go to school for making the company of organic juices, but somehow you kind of like put it all together.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way. Like, I believe that all information exists in the universe and is available to anyone who seeks it with earnest desire, right? So if you want to do something, you can do it. It's just a lot of work. So then we went from this 350 square foot basement kitchen to 2,500 square feet to 10,000 square feet to 20,000 square feet, opened up one store and then two store and then 10 stores. And then, we got very fortunate. We sold controlling interest to the business. But again, another naive thought. Like, I've had these naive moments where the investor comes in and, they say one thing and they go, we're going to have a great partnership and we're going to build Organic Avenue to the next Starbucks. And then the day they have controlling interest, you're fired. And I was like, what? Like, how can you, what are you talking about? And then I realized, like, hey, I'm a big boy. I'm not a victim. I signed a contract that gave you control. So be it. And so, you remain this level of equanimity. And I'm a very deep meditator. I've done multiple 10-day Vipassana meditations, 10-day sits, no reading, writing, speaking, eye contact, iPhone, like you're sitting in silence. And before this podcast, I did my morning sit in silence, observing. So the goal of that meditation is no clinging, no craving, no aversion, right? Maintain that level of equanimity. So I was like, okay, this is what's happening. So and I look for the good. This is, reading all the books, The Greatest Salesman in the World and the precursor to those books said within every adversity lies the seed of a greater or equivalent benefit.
That's
Right? So I was like, okay, so I'm fired. I'm out of this. Like, what's the benefit? The benefit is freedom. I get to do something else.
But you didn't. But I always like to get deep into it,
Yeah,
and like
I'm here for you, Rob.
Yeah, it's. But I have to believe that you felt some pain and suffering a little bit. And I'm using these words, on purpose, because there's a loss there. As an entrepreneur, you took something from the future, you created it in your present at that point, manifested it, and now it's taken from you. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm trying, and then it's not like, oh, that's great, I meditated, now I'm moving on. I assume there's some process that you went through of disappointment and called the wall. Like you're faced with, God, I built this thing. Now but maybe you're not. Maybe you're just like, yeah. Because I'm just curious. Like, do you remember what that day was?
Oh yeah.
Experience loss as entrepreneurs. It doesn't mean it's the end. It means it could be something like a seed. But I'm curious, what was the real feeling there?
I mean, the real feeling was, like the pit in my stomach. Like I made a mistake. Like this is over. What am I going to do? What did I do? And, then like when an entrepreneur has a windfall, immediately you think about like, okay, how do you protect the capital? Right. And so I was wondering because there was no more going to be coming in, right? This was it. And I felt a lot of pain. I felt betrayed, right? But the meditation really helped me not suffer,
Right.
right? So there was a real pain, but then there was the rationale of saying, I chose this, I did this, and like, what am I going to do? How am I going to make the most of this situation? So it wasn't like a level of depression. Like the depression, like there was a moment of true depression that I had years later while I was running Juicero. I was in, a long-term, long distance relationship. And the woman who I was with, I told her, Juicero is my top priority. It's like my top priority. And like I was very clear on that because I felt like it was an existential threat if anything happened to Juicero to my existence. And so one day she was like supposed to be coming to visit me in San Francisco from New York. And then she says, I'm not coming. I met someone. And so I got on like the next plane, and I go to see her, panic, recovery, get back mode. And she was like, look, I'm sorry, but I've been cheating on you for the last blah, blah, blah. And I met someone, blah, blah, blah. And like, I don't think you're very serious about this. And then, I said, I just give me a few minutes. And then I said, look, I realize that, and you'll know where this is coming from, right? So I said, I realize that you had needs that I wasn't fulfilling and that you compromised your values in order to satisfy your needs. And therefore you found a substitute man and you broke up. And I have no anger. Like this is the result. Like had I put you as top priority, this wouldn't have happened. So, and now like let's get back together. I'm like committed, etc. And then like we had a run on it, and I could never like, she could never forgive me for all of like the second the second fiddle priorities thing, and
I
that irked me.
yeah. So I've said this before. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, I didn't get married till 5 years ago. I know you're recently married. It's it's tough when you're building a business. I know, like I saw my father. He built this business, these small businesses. They went up and down. He had a family, 2 kids, and I saw the stress of it. I grew up with it,
Yeah,
and it, unfortunately, being an entrepreneur can be a very selfish act, to be honest, right? And a
yeah,
lot of people don't talk about it because you're committed to this mission that you believe was given to you, and you're almost possessed by it. You almost have to be possessed by it, and it's hard to let anyone into the crack of that thing. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs, probably struggle a lot with their own relationships, and how do you be an entrepreneur and make it work? I don't know if you've ever thought through that. I mean, now I'm older and I have more stability, and I have got more. So I felt I could get married, but I don't know, where you ended up with it all. I think
well, I mean, I remember being 50 years old on my birthday eating a salad in Whole Foods, really feeling sorry for myself, thinking like I really blew it, thinking like no one would marry me, like I just didn't really fit in. And San Francisco's not a really, hot city. It's not like New York or LA, right? So I had no social life. And then, I went back, and applied myself to work. And then, the juicero journey, and I don't talk about juicero a lot, but to me as an entrepreneur, that was a moonshot, right? To go to go from running basically a lemonade stand in New York City to go to Silicon Valley and figure out how we were going to create a piece of hardware, right, that looked like Apple level quality, to do sophisticated cloud-based software and ERP and management systems, and then figure out a fresh supply chain with produce that had never been done before, like never been done before, that it was like a science project where I mean, I'm happy like now there's enough time that's been passed that the charge has been diffused, but we had 50 engineers, 9 food scientists, 12 PhDs, and I want to solve the compostable packaging problem, not just for us, but for the world, because I was anti-plastic and didn't want to have that. So we were, solving the plastic problem. I knew from my Organic Avenue days that all juice that was in a bottle was pasteurized. And I knew that when you pasteurize the juice, you were killing, the vitamins and so I didn't want that like processed juice. And so I had this vision for fresh. And I was willing to go to any length to get freshness. And as a result, a few things happened. But at one point, when I look back at Juicero, my vision came true. I managed to figure out how we could get organic farmers to supply us with produce, to make the pack of fresh produce and make the juice instantly. And we sold thousands of machines and 1 million servings. And the people who loved the product. Everyone else hated me and hated the product. And I had no skills in how to deal with that level of vitriol or
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that with that, I remember I hadn't talked to you for a while, and all of a sudden, like first I saw the money raise of like $100 million, and I'm like, wow. I was following it, but then I saw, wow, this thing's on the map. Then like celebrities were using it, and Oprah's this whole thing. I remember, and then the Bloomberg article comes out,
yeah.
and it's like this thing is not real. It's just juice in a pack, and it's been dissected 20 different ways. of what happened, and maybe if you want to talk about it, you can. I'm just more interested. Like that was a very public thing,
Yeah.
and your name was tied to it. And I know you had the best intentions because I know where you came from about that world of good food, right?
Right.
High nutrient, like I knew where you were coming from because I knew you lived in an apartment where you cut your gas off because you're like, I'm not having gas. So I knew this was pure to the man's heart. But yet something happened on the execution. Then you're publicly, it's a little, not say embarrassing, but it comes out like this is not real. And then you have to, what was that, the vortex? Because a lot of people don't go through that. What was that like? What happened? You don't have to go into detail. A lot of it's written, so I don't want to rehash it, but what's inside that thing? A lesson,
Well, I mean, the vision was that I really believed in fresh green juice. Like fresh green juice was a delivery mechanism for micronutrients and polyphenols, and that all juice in a bottle was processed, and that making juice at home was a shit show. So I saw that people who had a home juicer were using it once or twice a month, but people who had an espresso machine were using it once or twice a day. So I thought like, hey, I want a healthy beverage for myself. Like I know people like fresh juice. We sold millions of $10 cold pressed juices in New York City, at Organic Avenue. Like we had hundreds of people following in our footsteps making cold pressed juice. So I thought that if you could create something at home that people could have fresh juice, they would use it. And there was what I defined in my own, and I don't think we communicated this well, but there was the produce gap. The
Yeah.
US dietary guidelines recommended 7 to 13 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. The average American was consuming less than one, which could have been ketchup and French fries. So I was like, this is my gift to the world. Let people have fresh juice on demand. And the Bloomberg article
Yeah.
was, it was almost like saying, and Rob, have you ever used a car wash?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you just take a bucket and a sponge and clean your own fucking car? Why would you spend $10 to go to a car wash? Right? I mean, why would, that shirt, like you probably get it dry cleaned, but that lovely sweater, you could wash that in your kitchen sink with less soap and less water and faster than using a washing machine, but no one's protesting against Whirlpool.
Right.
Right. So the Bloomberg article missed the fact that we developed a 111,000 square foot facility and engineered how we could take fresh produce from the farm, triple wash it, reduce the microbial load, dice it, slice it, chop it, shred it, put it into a patented pack so that when it went into the machine, you could apply a few thousand pounds of force and it would separate the water molecules, aka the juice, from the fiber, so someone could have a juice in 2 minutes with no setup and no cleanup. And what Bloomberg did was they very much created this scenario where the pack itself, they wanted you to believe it was just juice inside.
Right.
So they,
no process to the pressing.
Yeah. So they probably were practicing hundreds of times across the office and said, who can wring the pack out by hand the fastest to get the most juice out, which would be like the most terrible user experience to actually do that. And then they did a 2-minute video where it was like taking the car, rolling up to the car wash, right? And then pulling out of the car wash, right? And clean, or saying, okay, here, I'm going to clean I'm going to clean the car with a mop and a sponge and a bucket. So they show the woman going up to it, putting a little thing on, and then 2 minutes later, but they do it in 10 seconds, they show the shiny car. Yeah. And so they created this narrative that the machine was fake. You don't need the machine. and that Doug raises $120 million to create a $700 juicer for rich assholes, and that you don't need the juicer because you could squeeze the pack by hand. And ha ha, look at these Silicon Valley idiots who funded it. And it just became like this funny meme with schadenfreude and targeting. And if there were any other time in history, that article would have came and went. But because of the timing and the internet and social media and sharing and buzz feeds and gizmodos and no original fact checking, no authority for diligence, no original reporting, that one bad story became 250 stories in 65 countries in 20 languages. And then the business just became radioactive. And the investors.
Were you CEO at the time, or this
No.
time was when the board already had their conversation with you that you should be probably the strategic head or the part,
Yeah, blah, blah.
You brought there was a professional CEO brought in from some.
The former chief operating officer of Coca-Cola.
Okay, so you brought in a Coke guy to run a juice company.
And in hindsight,
what was that like? I mean, it's almost like you're not controlling the narrative, I assume, because you're not the CEO anymore, but you're the guy taking a bullet because you're the founder. And I'm just curious of like, what did you have to do? What was the scramble like during that time?
The scramble was that I was given a gag order from the board not to say anything, not to talk about it, and let the CEO handle it. And so I think the way the CEO handled it ended up being mocked further and just made it worse. And then investors, didn't want to fund it. Morale in the company became less lower than it was. And then I got fired from the company.
Fired. What was that? So you get fired like this? It's like the Steve Jobs story, except that was Pepsi Cola. So you get fired. It must have. Were you like? Once again the wall? Another wall. I think about you're like the guy who climbs and goes around walls and stuff. So you're like, what happened? Like that day, you're like, okay.
I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I really couldn't believe it, and because I felt like we had enough money, and the product was great. I mean, the first product. And when you say something publicly, no matter what you say, someone can take it out of context, dice it, slice it, and make you into, a narcissist or an evil person or an egotist. And, I had made the comment that, if you looked at the Tesla playbook, right, create an expensive, roadster built on a Lotus frame to prove that electric cars, were key, and then, build a car for the masses, etc. So the original Juicero cost $700. The one we had in development, was going to cost $199. So, in hindsight, we underestimated what the sales cycle would be, how big the addressable market would be, but we knew that we could, I felt we could solve it. And, what we should have done was after, we should have stopped selling the expensive machine. No one it's a big thing, like in this capitalistic society, to talk about money, right? When you got money, everyone talks about money. If no one knew how much money we raised, there wouldn't have been a story.
Right, because it was such a big, high-profile raise at the time, and for the juice product, and then they just went out after it. But basically, you're fired, and then this happens. Like I lost my first company, and we talk about failure a lot on this show, because I think, obviously, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to experience it because you're going to put yourself out there. You're going to put yourself out in a place that never existed, and you're gonna learn through failure. So I talk about like failure being a neutral place, not a negative place, a place of learning. So here you get fired from a company that had a lot of energy and passion on, And the learning was what? What happened
Well,
on the next day? Where you, once again, it probably took time to process it, looking backwards. But what did if you could go not to redo the tactics of it? I would have opened up. I would cheaper juicer, but as a
yeah.
person, you know what I'm saying?
Well, for one, um, we built a brand as opposed to me communicating like my values, right? Like right now, on Instagram, I talk about sprouting every day,
Yeah,
right? I talk about the benefits of sprouting, um, and I communicate with sprouters. And at Juicero, I spent all of my time, and this was a mistake, communicating with investors and communicating with celebrities, right? And recruiting employees, which are big jobs and they needed to be done. But we never had the opportunity to create a shield of the people who loved the product
the
and
customer,
communicated with them. The customer,
the real
I did
customer.
not have I
Yeah,
didn't have a relationship with our real customers. They loved the product, but I had no relationship with them. And I felt like in hindsight, if I would have had a relationship with them and Bloomberg would have written that article, there would have been tens of thousands of people that would have been Bloomberg like, you idiots, like we love this product in here, but we had no forum to organize this and no part. And so now, I mean, 4 years later, I still get, like emails from people. "Oh, I miss my juicero. Like there's nothing like I miss my juicero." And so that was one thing. The next thing, which I said before, is we never should have talked about the money.
yeah,
Like if no one knew about the money, we would have just been able to sell the product.
yeah.
I think that there are thresholds and milestones and forks in the road. I think that if we would have looked at how many units we needed to sell by which date and had a goal, and then developed a scenario planning and contingency plan, that what would happen if this happened. Like we had a disaster recovery plan in the event that someone got sick, right? That was my concern. If someone got sick, like we had all levels of how do we deal with the sickness, if someone
Yeah,
got E. coli poisoning or something.
yeah,
But we didn't have, like, if someone would have said you could squeeze the bag by hand, because I knew you could squeeze, everyone knew you could squeeze the bag by hand. If you go into Juice Press in New York City and you look behind the counter and you see the press and say, "Hey, if the press broke, would it be possible for you to squeeze me, the thing?" And they, of course, like if you couldn't squeeze it, there would be a problem,
yeah.
right? And then I think that part of Silicon Valley is go big or go home. And that, you know, like hiring quickly and retained searches and growing and putting money, that when you have a big burn rate, it's really hard to stop that train.
Dial it back. Yeah, I saw that in my. Yeah,
So I think if we would have grown a little slower and we would have, maybe not launched, right? Maybe had a soft, quiet launch and got the machines out there and then got the feedback and then, placed the order for the next version of the machine that would have been, a third of the price or a quarter of the price, that would have done it. Another thing is we were trying to do B2B and B2C at the same time. So we were in premium restaurants and high-end restaurants and chains and Whole Foods, and we're also selling to the consumer. And that was very complicated because then you need a direct sales force to hire distributors and go versus the direct to consumer. And so way too much. We should have picked one model. But then you hear people who you think are smart and they go, the only way this is going to be that $1 billion brand is it's got to be a consumer brand. No one cares the name of the oven behind the counter at Starbucks, reheating those McMuffins, right? No one cares about that.
yeah,
So you hear these things, and then in a way you try to engineer the company to please.
yeah. I think there's so many great lessons you just went through about focus, and I just think you hit so many topics there. awesome. Like that's what we want. And we're coming to the top of the hour. So I always like to ask a sort of a last question, which is, if you could give any advice, like the one piece of advice, which you've got so much history and experience on being an entrepreneur. Like I said, you're if I say serial entrepreneur, I see you in the dictionary, it's your face, and you keep going. But is there one specific piece of advice, even though you shared a lot of wisdom, that you would give to an entrepreneur, that you would say, definitely do this one thing?
Yeah, I think for one is that you have to accept yourself fully. Like really spend time in nature, right, by yourself, and feel that you are nature's greatest miracle. Like the fact that you are alive, that you can have this conversation, that you could have this opportunity, that you have within you the power and the capability to achieve anything or almost anything that your heart desires. Like it's all possible. And that the biggest enemy that you'll have is you. It's not your competitor. It's not Johnny down the road. It's not, the bank or the investor. It's you. So if you can become aligned with you, like, and use you for you, then you can achieve, great heights.
Awesome piece of advice, Doug. First of all, you're having great successes right now with everything you're doing on sprouting. He's got a book out that's just like doing awesome. Get it on Amazon. Look at his Instagram.
The Sprout Book. The Sprout Book.
And go to his Instagram feed. He's got people on there. I'm following it. I'm really going heavy into this whole world. You convinced me. And it's just following now. He's just landed on his feet. He's in a place you could tell of just seems like peace and harmony. And just as an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. And there's not a lot of those in the world. So Doug, just want to thank you for spending your time and sharing your wisdom with everybody. Thank you very much.